The New Orleans Pelicans are ditching Bally Sports as reported by Christian Clark of NOLA.com. Let's celebrate, right? Well, not if you still can't watch. And right now, there's more questions than answers, but this is definitely a step in a positive direction. I'll explain why in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Thursday. Don't forget, you've got this show, and we're doing a live show on YouTube at 8 p.m. Central tonight. My chance to interact with y'all, answer your questions live in the moment. Pop in, even if you just want to say hi. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down and sports stop sporting like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So let's get into this, because this was, again, reported by Christian Clark of NOLA.com and Times-Picayune. The Pelicans are parting ways with Bally Sports. We've all waited for this moment. We talked a little bit about it earlier in the week, that there were reports that Bally Sports was going to drop the New Orleans Pelicans, and then what would it mean? And now we have some clarity. Over-the-air television. If you are, say, in Louisiana and other areas, it's going to be Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, in Mobile, you're going to be able, more likely than not, to get Pelicans games for free over the air. Probably just means you need an antenna. The Pelicans are in an agreement with Gray Television, who own Fox 8 here, WVUE in New Orleans, to play games. So this is good, right? You know, the numbers bear out that, yes, this can be an improvement and a good thing for kind of like the health of the Pelicans here, of the franchise. Per the Times-Picayune, you know, when games were on Fox 8 last season, they drew an average of 46,057 households watching the game. It's a 260% increase from the 12,807 TV households the team averaged on Diamond-Owed Bally Sports, according to Nielsen data. So when they're on kind of the main station, major TV stations, Fox 8, whatever it is in Lafayette, in Lake Charles, in Baton Rouge, the ratings are significantly higher. This makes sense. People just flipping through the channels might come across the game. People who don't have access to Pelicans games might have turned those on just out of curiosity with that sort of thing. You know, so 7 of the games were, of the 10 that they did this little test run with, it proved it out, right? They did this test run last year. They also had a couple of games on a substation. So while Fox is channel 8 here in New Orleans, there's 8.2, 0.3, 0.4, whatever you want. Substations, Bounce TV. Pelicans, when they were on Bounce TV, so the substation, 18,400 TV households. So about 6,000 more than what you got on Bally Sports Plus. So that's a good thing. Like, just overall, the numbers bear out that if you're looking for just reach, this definitely accomplishes that goal. And Christian Clark says that this basically opens the Pelicans up to about 3 million more people to watch games than they had potential to before. So this is a really good situation, I think, for the Pelicans to be in overall. But I don't think that it's perfect, because look, will you actually be able to watch games? So for everyone individually, I can't tell you yet. And Clark's article does say that the exact, doesn't say all of the exact stations. And honestly, right now, we probably won't know if the Pelicans are going to be on Fox 8 or Bounce or whatever the substations are until we get the schedule and we see it. You know, I talked a lot about this. The reason this move hasn't been done sooner is because I don't know if the Pelicans love the idea of their games being on Bounce, right? They can't be on the Fox station, the main one, all the time because of Fox programming that they're contractually obligated to play and probably can't get out of. And again, Clark's article said a heavy amount of the Pelicans games are going to be on Bounce TV. That hasn't been necessarily the best product, right? How many will be on the main station, how many will be on the substation, is still up for a question. It sounds like, based on the 10-game sample we saw last year, every Friday game is probably going to be on Fox 8. It's the other nights of the week that things get a little bit dicey. So that's at least somewhat encouraging, and we can start to see. But once the schedule is released, I think we'll have a much better idea of where games are going to be and how you will be able to watch. Now, the good news is there's also going to be a streaming option in some capacity. The NBA has kind of stepped in and taken the lead on a lot of this, and will probably license out or just give out the kind of league pass infrastructure to stream games. So if you're in a place that doesn't have one of these substations or doesn't have one of these games, you should be able to get it streaming wise. It might be slightly cheaper than Bally Sports Plus was a year ago at $20 per month. This might be $15. You've seen the Phoenix Suns and the Utah Jazz do this, and theirs price is about $15 per month. We'll have more on that in the next segment here, because the team doing this is taking a risk, and it's not the cheap option for them. They're spending some money on this, or potentially losing money on this. And, in some sense, they should be applauded for actually doing that and not just kind of taking, the bird in hand if that's not the greatest option for them. But overall, this expands the Pelicans' reach. That's healthy. We'll get into that more in the third segment of today's show. But the big news is no more Bally Sports. Other things of note here is Joel Myers, Antonio Daniels, Jen Hale their contracts with the team, not with Bally Sports. So you'll still, if you get these games, be able to hear them. I think that's a really good thing. We love that broadcast booth, all of that. This is still going to be just the same. The Pelicans expanded their radio reach by switching over to WWL AM FM radio. From where they were the past season. I think that's a really good thing too. They're trying to expand their reach and build up this fan base more. So if you're looking for more Pelicans fans, one, come right here to Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And two, you'll be able to find them. People are going to be listening to the games more. They're going to be watching the games more. We'd like these games ideally to be on the main station. Again, that's easier for people flipping through channels to find. That's a good thing. But there still is a lot more questions that we don't know just yet. And we'll look at some of those coming up in the next segment here on Locked On Pelicans, because, well, part of this is good. Part of me is a little bit worried about this too. I'll explain what I mean. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down and we get fewer games and the sports aren't sporting like we want them to, FanDuel is going to let you keep the sports going whenever you want, and all you have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Yeah, no NBA, but MLB is going on. You got a feeling someone's going to hit one out of the park, hit a home run, you can bet on it. If you want to get in on the Olympics, Team USA making their run for the gold medal, you can do that as well. There's also NBA futures. You think Zion Williamson is going to be the MVP? You're getting plus 10,000 odds on that. Herb Jones is actually getting pretty good odds for Defensive Player of the Year at plus 6,000 right now. If you know they're going to have good seasons, you can get in on the action over at FanDuel. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of Locked On. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And now for your second listen today, Locked On NBA. There's no off season in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'm on there every Wednesday doing our national show, which is pretty fun and pretty cool to do. So if you want to kind of just a broader and general NBA take on the association, make sure you go to the Locked On NBA podcast. So right now on Locked On Pelicans, we're talking about Christian Clark of NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune's article about the Pelicans ditching Bally Sports. It's a good thing. Again, it expands the reach. The number bears it out. That little test run last year, I think, solidified this as an option for New Orleans. Even if all of the games weren't on Fox 8, but on Bounce, and more on that in a second, it's still better than where it was with Bally Sports. Like, that in and of itself is a good thing. We want the team to make more money, so they go into the luxury tax, and just make it better, right? Like, we want this team to be a healthy franchise, so there's also no concern about them potentially leaving. And there's going to be some of that in the future, don't get me wrong. But there's still more questions that remain about the switch from Bally Sports to over-the-air TV. And one of them that jumps out to me is, how much money are they losing on this? And does that impact other areas of the team? And this is why earlier in the week, for the everydayers, if you're an everydayer, that means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Let me know if you're an everydayer in the comments down below. One of the things is, they're in the luxury tax right now. It's about $2.2 or so million more they're paying. Can they afford it? Like, in theory, yes, right? Like, Gayle Benson could sell off some assets and generate money to pay for that, even if they don't have like the liquidity for it. But now all of a sudden, you're losing money from the TV rights. You are. Whatever Gray Television is paying the Pelicans, if it's anything at all, and who knows, there's probably something there. It's not as much as what their original deal with Bally Sports was going to be. That's just a matter of fact here. And in fact, in Clark's article, he mentions that, Diamond Sports, Bally Sports re-engaged with the Pelicans, offered them a new deal that was more lucrative than anything they previously had been presented. The Pelicans on Monday notified many of the major players involved they were still choosing Gray as their broadcast partner, despite Diamond's offer being 20% higher. Think about that for a second. They were offered more money and they chose to take less money because they view this as an overall better thing. I like that. That shows that they're not being cheap here, essentially, right? Being cheap would have been, hey, let's just take the money and just roll with what we're doing here. And also you have kind of the safety in that. It's a devil kind of situation. You know exactly what you're getting with Bally Sports, good and bad with it. There's less unknowns. That's, important when you're running a multi-billion-dollar thing. So they aren't being cheap here, but does this impact them in other areas? It might not. We don't know for sure. Does this mean they can't pay the luxury tax? Does it mean they can? Those are still questions that remain. And it's the unfortunate truth of, probably loving and following a small market team. The Lakers, you don't really need to worry about it. They might be run like a mom and pop because their owners don't have like billions of other dollars elsewhere, but they still are generate so much revenue that they're not really concerned about anything with them. Here we have to be. And so while I would like that not to be the case, and I don't particularly care about Gayle Benson's bottom line and her bank accounts, it's the reality of the situation, and we're going to view it through that lens. But just because they're not being cheap by taking 20% less doesn't mean that they're not being cheap, right? So if and when they build a streaming platform or have these games on the over-the-air TV, are these still going to be good products, right? When the games were on Bounce TV, it wasn't the best. Like, great, the games are free. I take that. I love it. It was easy for me to watch. You just put on the channel, and that's wonderful. But, the cameras weren't good. The high def wasn't as good as it could be. The signal quality wasn't as good. Is that getting upgraded, or is this honestly just going to be a bare bones product? That's kind of the big question I have, the quality of it, right? Those are things that are still up in the air, and maybe the Pelicans don't even have this sorted out just yet. You have about a month and a half before you need to kind of learn all of this, or 2.5 months before you really need to figure this all out just yet. But still, do you have time, and how much money needs to be invested to make this the best possible experience? Or is this just kind of, redo a Bally Sports in a different location, right? Like, that's kind of what it is. Honestly, for me, Bally Sports Plus worked fine. You pulled up the app, you watch the game, it would freeze once, you restart it, and you move on. Like, minorly annoying, not like the overall best experience, but the camera quality got better over the years. And when it worked, it was a perfectly fine thing. A little too expensive, absolutely, but I could get the games, and to me, that's the most important thing. If the games were, if it was having trouble streaming or restarting, or those outages that they had with it, right? Remember that there were outages to the service. That does you no good. You've got to avoid that kind of thing. You need to make this a bit of an upgrade. It's one thing to have potentially get more people to watch. Reach doesn't mean people are watching, and you need a quality product for that. You also need to educate on this and how much are the Pelicans going to be able to do that, right? Look, there's a funny story here where they threw an official watch party, I think at Wrong Iron or somewhere else, and the bar didn't have Bounce TV, which the game was on, and they had to figure out like what to do kind of in the moment. That's a thing that people are going to run into. If the goal is, hey, let's make sure the game is on in bars, if it's on Bounce TV or one of these substations, are they going to know what to do or how to find it? And that's still a bit, I think, of an open question. Now, there's time to figure that out, but you also need to invest resources into that too. Again, this needs to be a good experience. And there's still, I think, a bit of an open question, and people can fill me in, in the comments down below. Were you able to watch games, those 10 games that were on the gray television stations or not? I think there's a concern about the Lafayette area, and I'm sure they'll find partner or, stations and channels to be able to do this all with. But these are things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to it. So yeah, just because you have more reach doesn't mean the problem's solved, doesn't mean there's more revenue coming in either. You need to invest in this. Is this team going to do it? Or is this a situation where they're just like, yeah, no, we're good. Like, don't worry about it. And, you get what you get kind of thing. I don't think that's going to be the case. It does sound like they want to invest more into this. And I'd reported previously that they looked at bringing it in-house a couple of years ago. And I think this is kind of like halfway of doing that, where they're going to have a much more active hand in the content and the broadcast and the quality of everything. So overall, it's going to be good. And then there's the streaming option, right? For those of you in places that are maybe like black holes or don't have the right kind of coverage, you'll be able to get a streaming option. There will be a streaming option for this eventually, either this year, and then there's probably going to be a more robust offering in the future for it all here. But this is a bold decision by the Pelicans, in my opinion here. And I like that they're doing this and not just going with the safe option, which would have been to take the Bally Sports, the Diamond Sports deal and just do the exact same thing. But that would have lasted for like a year at most. Remember, this process started during the season last year, and we were worried, was the plug going to get pulled in the middle of the season? There weren't going to be games on TV, something along those lines. Like, that's there. But they do need to figure out some of the Bounce TV stuff, right? Bounce TV had about 6,000 more people watching the games. It's about a 50% increase over Bally Sports Plus. But 18,000 people watching those games or households, I should say, so it's more people, still isn't great, right? Like, you want that number as high as possible, and it's a significant drop off from the main station to the substation. So is this just a 1-year thing before they truly figure out what they want to do? That's, I think, maybe the direction that they're going to be heading in eventually. So it's a bit of a half measure just to kind of get out from, under like the crumbling Diamond Sports, Bally Sports situation. There is mention of something in Clark's article that I do find, as I lose my voice here, really intriguing. And this is what's really encouraging. And that is the discussion to launch a sports-only over-the-air TV network on substations in 11 different markets. That's maybe the most encouraging sign. And let's talk about what that kind of represents and what that could be and how it impacts you and the team coming up next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Is it sleeping in on the weekend, making sure you go to the gym, never skipping leg day? Or what about never skipping therapy day? When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. And even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever towards keeping you centered and making you the best version of yourself. Look, therapy isn't just for people with major trauma. It's about learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries, basically just empowering you to be the best version of yourself, or just work through little things that feel like they're holding you back. And BetterHelp can do that. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA to get started. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the Number One Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And now for your second listen, Ross Jackson and the Locked On Saints podcast. He's breaking down everything black and gold. He's there in training camp, covering it from the boots on the ground perspective in Irvine, giving you daily updates on everything black and gold. Subscribe to the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So there's a line in Christian Clark of NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune's article, that I really am encouraged by. Right? I view this as a little bit of a half measure right now. I don't think this will be a substantially different experience than Bally Sports. It might be a little bit cheaper. It might be free for you, but there's still going to be some headaches and hiccups and things like that, particularly with the games on Bounce TV, which are, look, a little bit tough to find. Not everyone gets those substations, and it does create some problems, but the reach definitely is more. But Clark says the Pelicans in gray are in discussions to launch a sports-only over-the-air TV network on substations in 11 different markets. The Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network could feature live sports programming, not just Pelicans games, but Birmingham Squadron and high school games too, in addition to other New Orleans Saints and Pelicans digital content. This is something that I love. This is something that I love because this is something the Pelicans have wanted to do for a while. They've wanted kind of a more robust offering. Give you more content that they partially control, so you can control narratives, messaging, all of that stuff. And this is a way for them to do that. What if you just created a substation that had the Pelicans games on it, but had a strong pregame and postgame show? When it wasn't Pelicans games, it had other programming around the Saints, around the Pelicans, LSU, Tulane, that you put on there. What if then you put high school football games on, high school basketball games on? I love the idea of being able to get the Birmingham Squadron games here in New Orleans and being able to watch those easier. Flipping through the channels, there's a game on, let me turn it on and see how those younger guys are doing. This is encouraging. Them looking to create a new channel that has to be filled with content does represent a monetary investment, in my opinion. This is them not being cheap and trying to deliver an incredible experience for you. Truthfully honest with you, there was 20, 30 minutes of pregame stuff on Bally Sports before the games. Was there really any postgame? The halftime show, all that stuff. There should have been more. There should be more. And now you can do all of that. Now, you've got to make it more accessible. On a substation, it's not great. They maybe rebrand Bounce. They maybe rebrand one of their other substations to do it or just create a new one. That's the first step towards this, but this is how maybe you do it. And then you also can put this on your app, and it's on-demand content there all the time. And look, if you're the team, someone who works in this area, you monetize that. You can put sponsors on those things. It generates more revenue this way for the Pelicans, or at least adds additional lagniappe for current sponsors. That makes them happy. That makes them renew their deals. More money coming in for the team to hopefully pay the luxury tax, right? Those sorts of things. Maybe pay eventually one day for renovations to the arena and things like that. That's the massively important side of this that I'm starting to see develop. This, if they invest in it properly, is something that could be a really, really good option for them and generate more money, give you a quality product, the fans that you want, and just everyone wins then. And that's what we want to see here, right? It's about giving the fans the best possible experience. I think this is a good first step in that direction. I don't want to call it a half measure because I don't think it is. It's a good first step, but not one that is overall the long-term final solution here, because I don't think the majority of games being on Bounce TV that doesn't, and I'd be willing to bet the majority of games are going to be on Bounce TV. I think the Friday games will be on Fox, but I think the rest might be on Bounce TV. Among some other ones too, and that isn't the significant bump, but overall it's better than it was, I think, but there are going to be some people that kind of get left out and frozen out by this too, and I don't think that's great. So trying to find an overall really great solution, this is a step in the right direction, but it still might take a season or two for things to really, really, truly be fixed. This is not just as simple as you get to go to a local bar, be like, put on the Pelicans game, it's on Fox. They turn to that channel and it's like, oh wait, no, we don't have an antenna. That's not ideal, right? Where is Bounce TV? How do you find it? Those are questions that are still kind of being asked, but hopefully the Pelicans will have a plan to kind of address all of that and to just, educate, inform people so that they can find the games that they want. But this is good, right? Like, this is good. This means there is an opportunity for people just flipping through the channels to watch a game, become more invested. You didn't have that before. And I like that. That drives people to the game, to the games, to loving this team, building a stronger, more unified, cohesive fan base, not just in the city of New Orleans, not just the state of Louisiana, but the Gulf South overall. Yes, get Mobile into the mix, right? Get Lafayette into the mix in all of those places and expand your reach as much as possible. This is a good first step for it. Also, it's just nice not to have to deal with the Bally Sports app anymore. Like, it was a pain. It worked fine at times, and it was just a perfectly suitable, fine product. When when a girl's like, oh, that guy's nice. And it's like, oh, that's not good. Kind of like that, right? I wouldn't even call Bally Sports nice. Just, it exists, right? That sort of thing. That was a bad analogy. But you get what I'm trying to say here. So don't forget, live show tonight. We can talk more about this during the live show. It's going to be a lot of Q&A, talking with y'all when it comes to everything. So I'm looking forward to doing the live show with y'all. Haven't done one of those in a minute. So let's break it down. Whether you want to talk more about the DeJounte Murray trade, potential Brandon Ingram trades, who's starting at center, all of those things, we'll cover it in the live show tonight here on the Locked On Pelicans YouTube page, 8 p.m. Central. It's already up. I will see y'all then. Kind of get 2 shows today. So I'm looking forward to hanging out with everybody, and I'll see y'all later. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This has been the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.